All right. The Adorable Boy Podcast, Episode 3, officially underway. This is your friend Spud coming at you, radio legend, now podcast legend. All right. Now, we promised you a special segment to look into the podcast war. And the Adorable Boys, we get a lot of mail. We get a lot of things sent to us online, actual mail. And the most interesting thing that came to me this week was a video of one podcast kowtower, James E. Cornette. He has a podcast. He talks about wrestling and, how much he hates Trump and everyone else. And Kenny Omega. He doesn't like Kenny Omega. He makes that perfectly clear. So this video came to me, and it really gives you an insight into the mind of Jim Cornette. That he thinks that he can come into broadcasting, come into podcasting, where the Adorable Boys have ruled the roost for so long. And he thinks he can just take it over. And I was wondering, where does he... he always played a braggadocious, if I can use a term that I'm not sure Jim Cornette will understand. He always played that kind of a character, He played a bad guy a lot, and he played a good bad guy. The guy's a wrestling legend. There's no arguing with what he's done in the wrestling ring. But what I always just wondered, what makes him tick? What makes him think that he can come and kowtow in the podcast medium and think he can get away with it? So this video gives some insight into that. So Jim, I know I haven't listened to this week's podcast at any one of yours, the Cornette Experience, I believe it's named. I'm not going to listen to it, but I just want to send this shot across the bow, Jim Cornette, because you're scared and it's obvious. I'm not going to say how it's obvious. It's obvious. We both know it. You're scared of the Adorable Boys. You're trying to avoid us, and we're not going to let you. We're going to keep coming after you. And in a way, you should feel honored that you're the first official target of the Adorable Boy podcast war. But we've named others. You're the first one that we're coming at full force, if I can quote Jeff Farmer. So let me give some introduction to this video, some preamble, if you will. This is Lance Russell. I believe it's from 1982, and it's Jim Cornette's first ever appearance on a wrestling TV show. You'll hear in the interview that he was around wrestling for a while, and he was taking pictures, and he wanted to get in to be a manager because he didn't. Well, I'll let the video do the talking. Actually, it's a grainy video, kind of. It's old. Jim Cornette is wearing a puke beige suit, glasses, his famous hairdo. He looks good. He's a typical, not even typical. He's above average wrestling personality of the day, and that's what I'll say about Jim Cornette. So let's give it a listen. We're gonna see what Jim Cornette has to say, and we're gonna find out this little insight into why he kowtows. So I'm gonna send it to Lance Russell from 1982, Jim Cornette's first televised wrestling appearance.
And right now I want to welcome out here a gentleman I have known for quite some time. As a matter of fact, I think many of you wrestling fans throughout the entire area have seen him at ringside, Mr. Jim Cornette. Jim is a well-known photographer. He's taken probably more wrestling pictures than anybody in the country, and is
a wrestling photographer. I just want you to... That's what Jim Cornette does. And he came into that business, and he worked hard. He worked his way from the bottom up. And yet, in the podcast business, he thinks he can just start wherever he wants, and I'm sick of it. So I'm going to let it play some more, and we'll learn even more about the psyche of the kowtowing podcaster, Jim Cornette.
An interesting part of it, too, he's been involved in the Championship Wrestling magazine, which many of you have enjoyed, and all the pictures in there. First, Jimmy, I appreciate you coming out here. I tell you the reason I asked you to come out here, because I know that you have been involved around wrestling as a hobby and taking pictures and that sort of thing for quite some time. But I heard now that you are talking about getting into it a little more deeply in the managerial end of it.
Well, Lance, that's correct.
And he's speaking with a pretty good diction. He just started talking. He's nervous, you can tell, but of course he is. It's his first first televised wrestling appearance. So let's keep going.
I have been doing ring announcing. I've been writing magazine articles. I've been taking pictures around the area for several years now. For the main reason is that wrestling has been my life. It's been my hobby. I've loved it ever since I...
Hold on. Stop it there, Frank. Stop it. Wrestling has been your life. It's been your hobby. And you've loved it since you were a small boy, huh, Jim Cornette? Well, podcasting has been my life. Broadcasting has been my life. And you come in and you kowtow, basically spitting on my life's work, on the adorable boys' lives' work. And you think we're going to sit back and take it? No, we're not. That's why we're coming after you. So when you wake up at night in a cold sweat and the pillow's soaked and you just feel terrible, you're sweating but you're cold, shivering, you remember the cause of your nightmare. You remember that you brought this upon yourself, that you made the adorable boys come after you. You remember that, Jim. All right, hit play again.
I was just a real small boy. And, you know, it's a dream of everybody that likes wrestling to one day be a great wrestler, be the world heavyweight champion or something like that. But for most people, it's an unreachable goal. It's unreachable for
You don't
me.
have the podcast background, Jim. You don't have the podcast background.
And as much as I've loved wrestling, the only way that I'll ever have a chance to be a direct participant in the sport is to be a manager. And I know it's a big step, but that is what I've got to do.
So you don't think you could be a wrestler, Jim Cornette? You think you could be a wrestler manager, a wrestler's manager. Understood. So why not just be a podcast manager? Don't get off the air. Don't kowtow. And then you wouldn't be being attacked by the adorable boys on Twitter and through the podcast world. Hit it again, Frank.
Ever want to reach my goal?
Well, Jimmy, I know that wrestling has been your hobby. Can you tell us a little bit about your background? What kind of work? What do you do for a livelihood? And all?
That's it. I've been photographer, writing magazine articles. See, not a lot of people know it, but I come from a fairly wealthy family. My mother has a lot.
I didn't hear you say you were a podcaster. I didn't hear that. Because you're not. You knew it in 1982. You knew you weren't a podcaster then, and you know it now. Press play.
A lot of money, and so I've just
pursued
this as a hobby.
There it is.
Generally, whatever I want.
I'm going to let it play again, but just remember, his mother has a lot of money.
She has gotten for me in the past.
Oh, okay. Well, and so now you're gonna get into the business. It's a tough business.
You pursued it as a hobby, and what you want, your mother has gotten for you in the past. You're doing it all over again, Jim. You're trying to skip paying your dues, and we're not gonna let you. We're not gonna let it happen. We will attack you because you don't love podcasting. We put our blood, sweat, and tears into this for 30 years, and then you come in with your mom's money. You can't even make your own way. You can't be your own man. You come in with your mom's money and you try to take over wrestling. And let's say you were pretty successful at it. Not going to deny that. But it won't happen with podcasting because the adorable boys are standing at the gates and we will not let you pass. That is the point of this podcast war. Play it again.
You're gonna get into the business. It's a tough business, and it takes some money behind it.
Well, I know,
too.
and first,
not as tough as podcasting, Jim, and you're gonna find that out. This Lance Russell can't even believe your audacity, your unmitigated gall, and I can't either. I'm echoing the feelings of Lance Russell, almost 40 years later. Hit play.
First of all, I don't mean to come out here and say that I know everything about wrestling or managing. I know a lot about wrestling. I intend to know everything.
Or about podcasting. You don't. Okay? You don't. I'm sorry if I'm getting a little angry, but this is a war. And anger has its place in a war, Jim Cornette. Hit play.
What I did was, when I decided I wanted to take this step, I went to my mother, and I said, Mama, anything that I've wanted before, you've got for me. And this is what I want to make my career. And she said if it would make me happy, if I scouted around, if I found somebody, she would write the check and she would buy the contract. And like I say, I don't mean to say that I know everything about wrestling, but with her money behind me, I can afford to hire as many advisors or trainers, anything that I need, and I will.
How do you sleep at night? Your sweet mother just wanted to make you happy. She just wanted little Jimmy to be happy. And you know what? Before this whole kowtowing podcast thing, I wouldn't mind it if you were happy. I'd love for you to be happy. I'd love for everyone to be happy, as long as they're not kowtowing and destroying the podcast world. Your mom can't write you a check for this, Jimmy. She can try. She can buy the equipment. She can do whatever. But it's content that is king. And the Adorable Boys have it up and down. We didn't have rich mamas. Some of us didn't have mamas. Okay? We had to work and sweat to get where we are in the podcasting world. Hit play.
Learn everything that there is to learn about wrestling.
Go ahead and hire advisors in the podcast world, Jim. It's not going to get you anywhere. All they will do is mess you up. We've had hundreds of programming directors and managers trying to weld the Adorable Boys into something that they wanted, but the Adorable Boys would not be welded. We wouldn't. So get your managers, get your consultants, get whoever you want. It's not going to work. Because as I said before, the Adorable Boys are standing at the podcasting gates, and we will not let you through.
Yeah, I've been going to matches all over the country for as long as I've been interested in wrestling. And what I intend to do is
You're going to try and learn everything you can about podcasting, Jim? You can't. Podcasting is in the soul. In my soul. In the soul of every Adorable Boy and every Adorable Boy disciple around the world. In our soul. You can't learn something that's in the soul, Jim. It has to be there. You have to feel it. You have to nurture it. You have to hold it at night. Cradle it and caress it. And you can't do that, Jim, because you're too busy kowtowing.
The top prospects around this area, but there's also a lot across the country. I'm going to go around, and as long as it takes me, I'm going to find somebody that I think can be a great two people, that I think can be a great team, possibly the World Tag Team Champions, and then also perhaps single champions as well.
Well, Jimmy, it's ambitious, I will say, and it's an interesting way.
You're going to find the world podcasting champions too, Jim? Is that what you're going to do? You got your co-host, and he agrees with everything you say, and I can't even believe you, Jim. 1982. You weren't kowtowing back then, Jim. You weren't. But I could see it in you. I can see it. And I could see the attitude. This gives me an insight into you, and now I know my enemy even better. I intimately know you, Jim. And I'm coming after you. Not literally. This is not a threat. I wish to inflict no harm upon you. I wish to take down the kowtowing podcast, though, that you create. And I would love to save it, Jim. I would love to make you a better podcaster, but it's not going to happen. You're too far gone. And that saddens me, but that's what I'm dealing with. The Adorable Boys deal in truth. So, hit play.
Get into the business. I did want to clear it up because I have known you for quite some time, and all I can say is good luck to you.
A lot of people
Jimmy,
want to do this, Lance, but as what I feel about it is, any way you can do it, do it. This is my goal, and this is what I want to do. Whatever means I have at my disposal, I'm going to do it.
Okay, Jimmy Cornette.
And that
good
just
luck.
says it right there. Not any way, Jim. You do it the right way. You podcast the right way. You don't have your mom write you a check. You don't do it. I'm sure she's a wonderful woman. I've heard you talk about her throughout the years. But she can't get through the podcasting gates with the Adorable Boy standing there. She can't get you through. You shall not pass, Jim Cornette.
Good luck to you, and we'll be.
That's pretty much the end of that video. Anyway, it's astonishing. Drop the bombshell that not only did Jim Cornette's mom write him a check to get into wrestling, but he has the gall to think he can just walk into podcasting, stroll into the place, sure, yeah, I'm going to win. I'm going to have everything. Put my jacket down, put my feet up. No, Jim. There are a lot of podcasters out there, and some of them are good. Some of them don't kowtow. A man you've been quite critical of, and your co-host, I know I mentioned this before, but your co-host once said, and I heard him on a podcast, correct me if I'm wrong, I may be wrong, but he diminished Chris Jericho's singing ability. I've heard Fozzy. I love Fozzy. Jericho can sing. Jericho can act. Jericho can wrestle. Jericho can entertain. Chris Jericho can podcast. Vince Russo. Like him or not, Jim, he was the Attitude Era, wasn't he? He can podcast too. He's not kowtowing. He says what he feels, bro. And I know you've had your differences, but I'm not gonna say he can't podcast, because he can. But you, Jim, you who want to stroll in like you're man about town. Oh yeah, I'll go in the refrigerator. I'll eat the chili. I'll drink the Sprite. Whatever you want to drink. Yeah, I own the place. I own the podcasting house. No, you don't. You will not get into the podcasting kitchen, Jim, because the Adorable Boys are standing there with one of those roller, I don't know the exact name for them, but the wooden roller, and we're not afraid to use it. Even though we don't know the name, we're not afraid to use it. We don't need to know the name to keep you out of our podcast kitchen. The Adorable Boys are sweating, not into the food, of course, but we're sweating figuratively, making, building, perfecting our podcast in that kitchen. And we don't have time for kowtowers to come in and think they can eat the chili and drink the Sprite and use the microwave and put their feet on the table and pee in the corner. We're not having it, Jim. That's all I got to say. This is a podcast war. And the Adorable Boys will not lose. AOL keyword, Adorable Boy Podcast. Twitter, @Adorable Podcast. Find us on the web everywhere we go. We're going to be right back. This is the Adorable Boy Podcast.